Good morning, everyone. Sorry about the alarm bell. It was probably enjoyable to listen to. I tried to make it all nice with the music and everything, and then my alarm goes off. Go figure. Microphone check, screen check. Looks like everything's working correctly here. Let me pause the music there. There we go. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Wednesday. Lots of big stuff going on Wednesday and a lot of market moves. But before we jump into all the fun stuff, on the left side of the screen, make sure to read through the live Trader Morning Prep PDF. Very important to go through and understand everything that is inside there. Just a quick note for you all before we jump in today. Please keep in mind that the YouTube broadcast does have between a 5 and 30 second delay, depending on where you're logging in from, which can definitely impact the timeliness of what I may be talking about at the time. I also just wanted to take a second to give a shout out to our latest members that joined overnight and yesterday. Thank you so much for the support. I'm pumped to have you on the SSFTG fam. If you aren't a member yet, you do have a few options available that you can check out in terms of furthering your trading education and career. Here on YouTube, you can check out the join button below the stream. YouTube fam gain access to the extended hours trading room, which continues on from the morning session from 10 to 11. Every member gains permanent access to the Discord chat server. And of course, you get the awesome badge next to your name here on YouTube, and it shows your support. Plus, it just looks cool. To understand our trading approach and what I'm doing here in the room, look no further than the Day Trading Academy. This is some serious stuff. We're not talking lightweight PDF that you're going to finish in an afternoon. We're talking 19 plus hours of course and study material, including homework and review. So you best tuck in. And that doesn't also have the hundreds of hours of stuff that we have on YouTube. And then finally, the big one, the VIP. VIPs have exclusive permanent access to our non-delayed stream covering the entire morning from 9 a.m. to 11, or usually around there, to ensure that you're on the fastest connection possible and you don't miss any beats. Along with that, VIPs also have access to our monthly VIP webinars, which there's one coming up next weekend, private VIP events, one-on-one scheduling access, all kinds of cool stuff. So whether you're here for the very first time or you're a seasoned VIP veteran over on the Zoom stream, welcome. I'm glad to have you trading alongside with me today, analyzing these crazy markets, especially today. We'll see how that all goes. Let's take a look at some news, some charts, see what's going on this morning. Don't forget to grab your morning DP levels. Those are posted for you this morning on the major 7 markets that we take a look at. So you've got all of those covered for you. And then as far as the news for today, if we look earlier this morning at 8:30, we had the core CPI for April came out 0.9% versus the forecasted 0.3%. And that was about it. There wasn't any large news aside from the core CPI. And as we go into the U.S. session, the only news announcement that we have is crude oil inventories. So that doesn't really have a big impact on everything. It's just on crude oil, in fact. That's it. So as far as the news calendar goes, we don't have a whole lot to worry about. The inventories are forecasted at a negative 2.817 million. If we go back to yesterday and take a look at what's going on the API, that came out at a negative 2.533. So if we look at what the market is kind of expecting for the inventories and what it came out as on the API yesterday, they're almost smack in line. It's perfect. So as far as the inventories go on what's expected to happen, well, right around negative 2.8 or so is kind of what the expectation is. If it fails way above or way below that, then obviously that can definitely throw some things around. That's about it from that perspective, though. Let's get that over there. Obviously, we've got quite a bit of volatility on our hands here. Looking at the overall movement on the near term, the NASDAQ is working its way lower and kind of grinding its way down. But after this most recent drive down that we had, it really just kind of... well, it really didn't keep things going. You know, that was kind of the issue where it tried getting the drive down with an aggressive push, but ended up being just all wick on the bottom. Like it couldn't stick the landing. That's not very good in terms of what happened there. If we look at the overall move the last time around, assuming that this leg up would have been sellers, If we look at it from their perspective, their POC was built up at the high. So assumably their average is they're short from right around there, and it appears as though it's come back and tested that area, and now we're kind of challenging back to the downside again. If we utilize this zone as a way to kind of gauge what has happened, this will give us an idea of whether or not the sellers may have hit their objectives. So if we're utilizing the top to the POC average, we can see that we have bounced off of a 2-to-1 objective. No wonder we're bouncing so aggressively down here. It doesn't need to get a higher low. The sellers who have built into their shorts have already been given their 2-to-1 profit targets. Kind of makes sense. So given the 2-to-1, 3-to-1 move that we have to the downside, a lot of sellers have already hit all of their objectives. They don't have a reason to stay short, and if they are still short, it's probably, or more likely, on a lot smaller size. If they were holding 10 contracts, they're probably down to like 1, very, very low size, trying to get it to go a little bit further. And seeing it reverse all the way back up, if it gets much through that break-even point, which is back at settlement, then it's fairly obvious that the sellers have lost the fight, and that would probably cause a fairly strong reactionary move back to the upside, which buyers would obviously love in terms of the, the V-bottom on the bigger picture. Very interesting movement going on. So far, prices under the POC and sellers are winning, but we have hit a lot of their objectives. On the S&P, wow, big flush to the downside. If anything, maybe a little 3-press wedge low. You could draw this up a million different ways. You could also draw it up like that, and maybe it missed it. The one thing that's very obvious is that the lows didn't stick. They hit the bottom and just bounced off it like a rubber ball. Gone. So with that amount of conviction and the obvious undertow that's going on here, this would lead me to believe that if sellers were trying to sell aggressively, and we'll be able to see that in volume in a minute, I would wager to guess that there's a POC probably around the 4140s. But if they are selling in here, they're probably not going to want it to get much above that area anymore. So if we look, once it populates here, there we go. I need to be able to see it though, please. 80. All right. And then we've got the POC. So again, same thing. We've got the average, they're shorts, they've hit all of their objectives to the downside. The sellers on the S&P did at least get a new low, so job done there, and it was obviously bought back up. I mean, this is crazy how much of a slide down that was, but look at the amount of support. It's obviously changed. Something is different. The market was screaming to the downside, and now we've got like this sideways, choppy, sloppy accumulation phasing stuff going on with a major undertow at the bottom. Everything is at least suggesting that we should have a deeper retracement. It doesn't necessarily mean that the buyers are going to come swarming in and we go screaming to the upside. Obviously, perma bulls would love to see that. But in order for that to happen, we've got to get back above this 41.45 average if those are the bulls. I don't really see that in volume, to be totally honest. We have a profit-taking move down, which would suggest that sellers were here and taking profit on the drive lower. We hit major lows, POC shifts, but then it just drives down again. Just one big bump. Almost feels like we kind of need another one. They got a lot of work to do yet if the bulls are going to take it. It's looking good, though. On gold, what a wick. Holy crap. We had again, the non-farm high and low has been an absolute train wreck. We've known that and expected that for ages now, ever since that candle showed up. And the highs rejected, the lows rejected, and now we're back up to the highs again after near missing the bottom. I think that gives us a lot of info. The near miss at the lows and the fact that we just cycled off of the top to the bottom, now we're back up to the top. After a quick little flush that missed the base, this seems like it's about ready to try to pop through the high. I'm not a breakout buyer, and I won't ever attest to be a breakout buyer. I'm usually not very good at it. In fact, I would much rather let the breakout happen and try to get the pullback back in a more favorable zone of interest as far as risk is concerned. So right now, from gold's perspective, we got to break the highs. We need that proof. It's got to kind of finish the job. If we look at the overall move, it's likely that that quick wick back was a POC grab if it's low weighted, of course. Ninja, killing me. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if that's where the actual POC was. I would assume so, but I mean, realistically, this drove all the way back down, higher low failure. It's looking really good. And now they're back above even that POC. Crude oil, expecting some bullish numbers today, and, well, we've got some bullish indications. We've got a nice undertow at the lows, or in this case, it's not really an undertow so much as just a divergence on the MACD, which has procured a new high. That new high, if we look at this from the trend perspective, all the way down at the bottom, we have an L5 rotation, which is fine. L5s usually are going to look for a healthy L2, only an L1, L1, didn't get it, finally get the dip down to L1, L2, crushes right through it, goes down to L3, and then gets the bounce back up. L3 is a level of confusion. It's not necessarily a trend continuation as much as it could be potentially a heads up. Like, hey, if we make it back up to the highs and they don't go back up, there could be a potential problem and we could be seeing a reversal sooner than later. So this L3 was kind of like a little bit of a warning sign. We had some yellow lights. They squeaked through the yellow light though, and they broke all the way above the highs. And that's when the market came back once again, kind of reconfirming another L3. We once again have confusion. The market's like, wait a minute, what the heck's going on? I thought it was going up, it didn't make it, but then it did make it and kind of stalled and then really broke out of the highs. You'll notice they had a little bit of a funky gap right inside there as well. A lot of weird kind of stuff going on, and then it grinds all the way back down. We have another L3. This could very easily be a rep L3 because if you look at repetitious patterning, right, very obvious divergence at the lows, and that was basically the bottom. We have very obvious divergence at the lows, although a little bit more extended. That is almost potentially the bottom. It's very close. We've already broken above a new high. Realistically, buyers are going to be looking to buy that next pullback. So utilizing bullish news to cause a bear drive would be fantastic. That would be like the perfect storm because that would get all of the sellers trying to short, thinking that the news is for whatever reason bearish, even though it likely came out bullish. They get selling into all basically just absorption. If that's going to be the play, of course. Over on the euro, gargantuan wick. Jeez, just all over the place. Huge wick up and down. Not necessarily in one candle, although in the hourly it would be. The high and low of that candle is very likely, just like non-farm, going to cause some issues. And speaking of which, it's actually hovering right inside non-farm. Notice that. We're back to the highs again. Kind of the similar situation that we just looked at. The only big difference here is that we haven't really come off of the lows of those non-farms. Very obvious undertow across the highs, over 3 highs, although not perfect. We haven't really broken down. We are back below 0 now in the MACD, and they're kind of getting underneath that area, and we're trying to hold it from the underside. So we can see that sellers are definitely giving it a shot here, but, I mean, lordy. This is not the type of move that sellers are going to want to sell into, and the overall tone on the euro is incredibly bullish as is. This just seems like if sellers were short, this is challenging their break even, and if that fails, it's probably just going to go right through the top anyway. And we can see where their average is. Sellers' averages are likely hovering really top-weighted. They got a good price. So 21,735, I mean, it's hard to believe they didn't get a lot of targets on that big slide down. That's going to be the break point. We crack above that, and it's game over for the shorts. Bitcoin's still stagnating, not really doing a whole lot of anything, just big drive down, big drive up, and we're stuck in the middle of it, hovering around the 56,000s at the moment. Nice bounce off 55 yesterday, so that worked out great. As far as the wedge and what's going on, kind of wedge, they never really hit the lows. So, maybe we want to get one more push down, but I think this inside swing is going to be the big factor. They tried piercing underneath it, and the reason why I like that area, or even potentially this swing, depending on how aggressive they want to be, is we broke very heavily underneath it, hold it as resistance. They try, they fail. They try again, they fail. Now they've broken back up. All of those sellers who are trying to get it to go down are going to be looking to get out. And those are the areas where they're going to be looking to do it. Now, if we utilize volume, which I'm not going to do on Coinbase because that's just going to crash the chart, but hang on real quick on TradingView. I can see where that is. All right. On that move down, the POC cluster is at 55,559. 55.55 basically. So the POC cluster is basically right at the lows, giving us even more emphasis of what's going on. Buyers are trying to get it to rotate higher. And if we see continued defense around those 55.5s, there's a good chance that we see a continuation rally back up to new highs. maybe through 60,000, and then maybe we see a Wi-Fi move. Did you guys see that on Wi-Fi? Jeez. YFI, Yield Financial, that coin went from 48,000 to 95,000. That is insane. That rally was bonkers. Anyway. And then we've got Ethereum, which just continues to keep going up. BTFD. But all you can do, really. All right. Over on the NASDAQ, starting off on the daily and what's going on here, we have a big rotation finally closing underneath the top of L2. We know buyers bought it. No secret. We've now closed underneath it. Guess what's also not going to be a secret? A lot of those traders aren't going to want to be long if it fails to get back above those 453s. We do also have L3 buyers, which are going to be looking to grab some profit targets back up into that area. That would be right around their 2-to-1s. Although still, preference-wise, 12,800s. Much more interesting on that deeper pullback. At the moment, we are at, I believe, we were at the measured move, yeah. And yesterday could not close underneath that measured move. Still got those stupid orange lines. Hang on. What are you? And let's go a little bit of a different color so I can actually see it. Hot pink is always a solid choice. There we go. All right. So market is attempting to get through. Granted, they still have 7.5 hours or so, but yesterday was a giant doji. Closed all the way back up. Could not get underneath that POC cluster. Not to mention the earlier POC up at the 905s. Very challenging. Next zone of support is going to be down at the bottom of L3, but I mean, again, those 12,820s, they're so good looking. It's just gotta get down there. Hasn't quite done it yet. Looking on the bigger rotation, obviously in the short term, the trend has shifted to the downside. In the long term, this could just be that L3. But the beauty about the fractal time frame approach is that on the 60-minute chart, we have an obvious bear trend. There's no reason to be looking at the bull side of things when the bears are winning the fight on this perspective. We are moving down. We're way below the moving average cluster now. And it's a lot more than just, it went down, cool. It's back up. No, we have an actual break. We've got moving averages crossing down. We've got the market tried to go back above and failed again. We've got a lot of excess proof here. Sellers are trying to get this rotation lower. And if we look at the overall move from the top to the bottom, and luckily the top was this vindictive little SOB of a top over here, but we've got this rotation down that ended up being an L3, really gross looking. Big slap to the downside, and they finally came back and they got the L4. And that was kind of game over. Rotated off that L4 and went screaming lower. After L4s, when they have substantial proof like that, typically you're going to see sellers trying to hold the L1, which is exactly where we are right now. Also, coincidentally, or not coincidentally, the opens and closes lining up directly with the L1. Cue the X-Files music, right? So, a lot of interest to the L1 on the downside. Sellers looking for more. And we'll pop that over there. All right. And then over on the 15. From a volume perspective, side note, what a fantastic rejection off of that. And then even when it came back and failed, still allowed that area out. And look at the residual support resistance that's coming off of this. It's insane. Just off that little kind of nondescript swing in the middle of all of this. It's nuts how context can derive those levels. As we have that continuation back to the upside, though, it is fairly obvious that we do have some new highs. And while the market was continuing back up, we created a top-weighted POC, which, again, in hindsight, we do know that sellers have tried to take back over and have successfully made all of their objectives. So if this does want to continue down for the sellers, it's icing on the cake, which is always nice for them. But from the perspective of pressure, that doesn't add a whole lot of pressure, right? The only pressure that could be coming in here is if it does break down, we might have some FOMO sellers looking to get that next leg. That's about it. As we continue this into the lower high from today, the POC really didn't change a whole lot. So sellers are still dominant, but if we break above that, game over. Got a little bit before that happens, obviously. Looking at the 500 tick and kind of figuring out what's going on the faster side of things, the Asian and Euro session are stacked, but, well, I don't think that's going to be a concern. We are fairly far away from that area. If we do look at the Euro session's move to the downside and kind of subdivide it into deviations, we can see that it did go 2 times the distance. We already know that there's a lot of things acting as support down here, but that adds to it a lot, and we're seeing more and more and more support coming off of that. Notably as well, we are also seeing higher lows and some higher highs, although more recently a lower high. So there's some short-term context that buyers are trying to get going, but the big thing that has to happen is to get back above these short-term highs before they can actually take it. So, with that in mind, even though we are at some major objectives for the sellers, from the Euro session at least, if we look at this from the sell side perspective, the sellers have a mid-weighted POC, which ended up being horrendous in hindsight, but as they get a little bit more time, well, they really didn't do much, did they? Still have that middle-weighted POC. Yikes. That'll be nice if it breaks a new low. Then the sellers really won't have to fight back too much. Now let's see what these bad boys want to do. All right, sellers still trying to get this to continue back to the downside. And then over on the S&P, and it really feels like the bulls lost their grip a little bit on the S&P. That weak doji top on the 5-minute, and now they're rotating back down? Yikes. I mean, it's staring at the edge of a cliff down here if it breaks through 41.13. It's just all wick. And another doji. Lovely. We've got 4.5 minutes until the open. Right around the corner. See what the market wants to do here with this volatility going on. Look at those jumps in volume nodes too. Wow. Some serious, if I had to make a guess, those are some serious profit targets that were taken out. Limit orders that were just sitting there. What a crazy move. Zooming into the slightly narrower perspective. We do have the... Man, that last move was... That just did not work for him very well. Bottom weighted POC at 3160. S&P is finding some support off of the 1DP with the open right around the corner here. 41.1875 is a short-term zone of resistance. For sellers to try to pressure back. Keep in mind the volatility is incredibly high today. So the distances, the stop sizes that you're going to have to utilize, the risk aspect of things is going to be stretched really, really wide today. If that concerns you, a logical move would be to, if you're trading the mini, go to the micro. If you're trading multiples on the micro, reduce size. If you're trading singles on the micro, maybe sit on hands. Rather be out wishing you were in than in wishing you were out, right? 1875 is a zone of previous support. Buyers tried getting it going to the upside, but totally failed. I'm looking for those buyers to give up, which is usually one of my favorite ways to find entries. See if they can get that rotation down on the S&P. Well, first they got to actually pop up and fill me. They came close. $928.5. We've got the open right around the corner. S&P, no. Maybe we get a little bit of a volatility pop at the open. Well, maybe. I know we'll get a volatility pop at the open. I want to see that volatility pop up and then just pop it right back down again. Lots of popping. Or beforehand. I mean, that's cool too. $30 seconds until the open. Hey, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the nut house today. Jeez. Today is just, the volatility is crazy. Better bust out that 5-point harness. Make sure you're strapped in. All right, here comes the open. Looking for a quick pop at the open up to that 1875 for scalpers to drive the market back down. They went to 18. What happened at 8:30? Apparently, the core CPI. That's a heck of a response for the core CPI, but it happened at 8:30. All right, S&P fills the shorts to attempt the drive back down again, but remember, we're dealing with the open. 20. given the volatility, we should be able to get that flush back to the first entry points around 1875. And then from there, the downside objectives would be back down through 1250, but I'm going to jump it on the S&P. There we go. Nice quick snap down. Grabs the targets, finishes the job. See if they can get a little bit more, but I'm out for the scalp. Nice quick little pop. Sheesh. Still just kind of sideways and chopping. Technically, haven't broken a new low. And technically, they haven't broken a new high. We're stuck. Now that they've popped back up so aggressively, that 1875 becomes very interesting, but from a reversal side of things. Again, just for a scalp. But this move up is shutting down a lot of sellers who are trying to get that move going. And if they can get a quick little snapback, that would be the zone that they can try to get it going. That was that little snapback, and I did not get filled. All right? I've got to cancel that. That happened so fast. Like, what? It snapped down like 2 ticks for my entry and then jumped right back up like it never even happened. Golly. All right, S&P starting to take notes from the NASDAQ here. NASDAQ still stuck on the inside of this move. If we're looking at this from the sell side perspective, technically we have the inside high was next. Although, wow, what an order drop right there. Jeez. When the market came back up to that point, it's no wonder it stopped early with a lower high. Likely that's enough to shift the POC, but they didn't. The important thing that everybody's waiting for right now, new high or new low? Give us proof. Sellers are demonstrating a lot of resistance off of those 23s or so. So if the buyers are going to go, they've got to break above that. They're poking it, but can you believe it? First 5 is done. It's only been 5 minutes. POC right at the top for the S&P 2250. And for the NASDAQ, an incredibly obvious POC at 150, which Ninja will let me put it on there, 50. There we go. So 13,150. Oh man. That's a really nice break back down again. I like this area from 23 to see if sellers can reclaim this move back lower. Jeez, this thing moves fast. Beautiful. Out on the scalp. This thing is just nutso right now. I mean, it's a beautiful rejection off of 23. Did exactly what you kind of expect to do. It's just, what's atypical is seeing the S&P slide through these areas so fast like that. That's wild. Nice quick snap right back down again after attempting the highs. They haven't broken above 19.5 yet. It came close, but they haven't done it yet. Finally, the NASDAQ roller coaster, right? Yeah. It's a good and it's a bad thing. You know, the good thing obviously is that it's fantastic if you're scalping. Beautiful movement, lots of volatility. You can't beat it really. But that said, the other side of things is if you're on the wrong end of it, or you're on the right end of it, and then all of a sudden in milliseconds you're on the wrong end of it, that's where the downfall of the roller coaster comes in. So you just got to be fast. Sellers look like they are having a heck of a time trying to get this thing to continue. Still bouncing around those lows, around that -1 DP, just hovering. This is the seller's shot. Can they take it? That bar 2 on the RTH chart, not exactly convincing. What a wild ride. I mean, if the market's going to bounce anywhere, if I had to look for a higher zone of interest for buyers to bounce off of, back down to those 13 quarters is a huge zone where buyers would be expected to pick it up off the lows. And the only reason I would ever even consider buying, especially more than anything else, is because it's the S&P. The S&P, generally speaking, has been much more bullish than the NASDAQ, and it's going to be more apt to have short-term bounces that are in favor of that. Even on these dips underneath the lows like that, that's a fantastic spot for scalpers to try to give it a shot. High risk, though, because there's not a whole lot of support if it slides through. The other side of things, if you were looking to continue to the downside on the NASDAQ, would be looking for, it would have to be on better value. Looking at this previous 5-minute bar, this gigantic Jumbotron candle at 8:30, the value all came in at 8.50. So I mean, even that's on the buy side. That doesn't help the sellers at all. If I were looking for, I guess, any other sell zone, would be the last time the sellers succeeded defending a leg up. That'd be back here, up at 33.75. It's a few spots. That 850 is pretty interesting, though, huh? Back down to 13,160. We have had a lot of failures of the sellers trying to go lower, but again, we have not broken the high. That's the problem. Bulls trying to get this to rotate back up to the upside. So if I want to be a buyer here, we've got to see sellers getting stuck. It's the most important thing right now, is seeing sellers getting stuck if I'm going to be a buyer. If I'm going to be a seller, then, oh man, look at that top weight. Are you kidding? Oh, okay. Well, 14 quarter it is then. Fair enough. That's nuts. A little bit of a cycle back down again. The POC there was also at the top. Nice continuation movement to the downside. All right. Holy crap. I guess we'll wait to see what happens when it comes back up to 14 quarter, but I'm not necessarily opposed to being the first one to the party. I just want to see if it wants to pop through it or if it's just going to slam into it like a brick wall. Oh, nope. Not that one. All right, we're getting back up into that area. 14s, 15s, up in this zone. This is where sellers are going to try to be pushing back. Keeping an eye on this 14 quarter area. Very nice pop back up through the top. And a nice slide right back down again. Beauty. Not as fantastical of a slide as I wanted it to, but I'll take it. Nice little slide back. Small loss on the initial portion, medium win on the middle, and halfway decent on the last. Nice little pop through that zone. They've broken above it, though, very aggressively, and it was pretty obvious on that first bounce that sellers might have been rattled a little bit, like, wait a minute, why did it go above that? You saw the bounce as soon as it came back. They might have exited a break even a little bit. Seeing it go back down again and now back up again, that's even more proof that sellers have potentially liquidated. Now it's gone in their favor, in their direction by just a little bit. Remember, right? Let's say, as an example, you were short here and you saw it pop up, you shorted a little more, you shorted a little more. The market slides back down, and maybe you weren't as fast to exit. I'm more on the scalp side, I know. But it starts sliding back down. It bounces off your original entry point. Giant bear engulfing bar. Now you're back in the green again, right? You're back in your positive territory, and then it goes immediately negative again. Like, wait a minute. So what do you think is going to happen when it gets back towards that break-even point? It just showed you right there. See that bounce? That's not a coincidence. They might still work their way through it, but that initial snap of like 20 ticks, that's all those orders flooding out. Nice bear bar for the sellers to try to push it lower, but if they fail to trigger and it goes back up again, that's just more problems. If the sellers are going to take it, they need to rotate down pretty aggressively as proof. That wick on the 5 minutes, a good start. Oh, there it goes. Even more proof that those sellers that we already knew exited. But if you needed a blatant slap in the face with with the markets showing you, there's even more proof for you. How's that? One for the textbooks. Nice continuation breakdown. Very, very good proof. That's fantastic for the sellers. Now we've got a heavy break back down underneath 14 quarter. If the sellers are going to take it, that's going to be where it's from. Maintain and kind of, or ascertain rather, what I was going for, where their targets are going to be to the downside. The 1-to-1 objectives down at 97. We've got 2-to-1 objectives down at 80 quarter. There's still plenty of room for sellers to sweep this farther down, which means that this 14 quarter just now became a very hot spot for sellers to try to repressure. If it even makes it back up there. The concern, obviously, is that they broke above a new high. So I don't necessarily want to be the first one to the party this time around, but if they start showing up heavy, that's a definitive answer. And if we break away even further, it's even more. The market's already bearish. Don't hit the 2-to-1. Okay, don't hit the 3-to-1. Come back before the 3-to-1. We do have a bounce off the 2-to-1. Those sellers who are utilizing actual risk, very obviously taking profit here. Whoa, what a surprise. See if we can get this to back up into that zone. Sellers trying to get the continuation back to the downside. 13,160. 13,160 resistance? Oh, support? I mean, that's definitely a zone. Yeah, I mean, that would be the seller's objective. That would be their 3-to-1. And when you're looking at actual risk targets, if you're seeing support, if they're proving that they're taking profit off of a 2-to-1, which they are, when they get down to the 3-to-1, there is almost always, not always, almost always a bounce there. And if there's going to be a reversal that takes it back up through the highs, that's usually where it ends up being. Sellers trying to jerk back up here on the NASDAQ. Earlier entry points around those 14 quarters. Okay, well that happened fast. I wasn't able to hit the button fast enough for that. Jeez. It went up to 14. I guess the next spot, if it does want to go a little bit further, since I missed that one, would be piercing into the 220s. S&P is attempting to break through this this kind of congestion. I mean, the S&P is a mess right now, but... All right, nice potential spot for continuation, but I want to sell it back a little further. I don't want to sell it too far in. 20 makes a lot more sense. And still waiting. S&P waiting for that 20 area. It missed me so far. What did it go up to? 1950? And then cycles all the way back down. All right, I missed the S&P. No fill. Came 2 ticks away. I'm not going to re-enter now if it goes back up. I'm too late. Sellers attempting to get more continuation to the downside. NASDAQ's trying to pierce through these lows. That's that 2-to-1 zone, so we know why they're having trouble here. Breaking down a little bit further. See if you can get a pop up into those 17, that area. I'm sorry, 78, I mean. I didn't get a fill. Man. What do I have to do? Tried selling that little pop, but I didn't get a fill on that move. The downfall of sell ask sometimes. 3-to-1 objective has been achieved almost perfectly. I think they went through it by a tick, which is just enough to get them all filled. Blink 3 times for better filled. Yeah, I know, right? $10 right around the corner, top of the hour. And keep in mind, 10 o'clock is when we shift over to the extended hours for VIPs and members on the SSFTG fam. So if you're on the free side on YouTube, feel free to get those questions in. We'll get those covered for you. And then we'll head on over to extended hours. Man, this is tough. Yeah, I totally agree. This thing is just it's the same thing that happened yesterday, remember? It was what was it? 3 no fills or something like that on the S&P. A couple misses on the NASDAQ, and the volatility hasn't gotten better. Or it has, depending on which side of the fence you're on. So, sheesh. Whippy, whippy, whippy. Flat with 117. Nice. Hey, given the way that today's going, flat with positive anything, I feel like is a good spot to be right now. Side note, did you see that rally on sushi? I hope you were paying attention. We were talking about it yesterday. Sushi USDT. Holy moly, what a rally. Boom. Just a casual $4 move. No big deal. $25% in a night. Man, I love volatility when you're on the right side of it. I mean, I don't know what happened to Wi-Fi. To be totally honest, I have no idea what happened to that thing. It just went absolutely nuts. Like, look at this thing. Wi-Fi USDT. Look at the price scale. 50,000. 95,000. What? Oh, you know, just a $20,000 pullback. No big deal. Lordy, these things are nuts. That's insane. I don't even know what to do with that. Like that's incredible. As far as to why it did it, I don't know. If I'm looking for a value pullback, the most recent value pullback was 48%. If we go beyond that to the one after, that was 34. So I feel like if you can find a pullback that's between 34 and 48, you're in the hot spot. I don't want to be a buyer way the heck up here. But 34 puts it at 62,000, give or take. And 30... Just do 40 for easy numbers. 56,000, 57, 56, 57. So that's your hot spot right there. Absolutely nutso chart. Seen a lot of those recently. Sellers continuing to the downside. Unfortunately for me, no way in. They missed the secondary entry point by 2 ticks. Tried grabbing the first one around, which slid through, but it worked out nice for a scalp. And then just gone. Never came back. Coming back down to 13,150 settlements, or the 5-minute zone of support. Pretty big zone of interest. It's also the L3 retest on the 5-minute, on the daily chart. Not even close. 10 o'clock, top of the hour. Here we are. Next news announcements after 10 o'clock are going to be 10:30. We don't have any news at 10 o'clock. 10:30 inventories forecasted to be positive or bullish. Would love to see a bearish move on the inventories. But that's going to do it for the morning session. For the extended hours, you VIPs and members, well, VIPs, you just have to hang tight real quick, and members, just got to jump over. The link is posted in the community section. You'll be able to get in from there. For the rest of you, I hope you had a fantastic trading morning, and we'll see you all tomorrow morning, all right? Enjoy, rest up, and we will talk to you all then. Thanks.